Mr. Fuji was a tuxedo-wearing paradox. He looked like your polite uncle from Honolulu, who might offer you a Werther's original and tell you about the war. Instead, he'd throw salt in your eyes, sabotage your car, then casually bow and say, "Respect." If there was a Mount Rushmore of wrestling villains who could make mischief seem like a fine art, Fuji would be sculpted into granite with a devilish smirk and a handful of pepper. Most fans remember Fuji as the devious manager of such luminaries as Don Morocco, Yokozuna, and Demolition, but backstage, he wasn't exactly handing out Christmas cards. Beneath a facade of fake blood and rehearsed rage, Fuji harbored real resentment for certain wrestlers. We're not talking kayfabe nonsense or playful ribs. This was pure, unfiltered shoot heat, the kind of stuff that makes an already sweaty locker room 10 degrees hotter. Mr. Fuji didn't just dislike these people, he despised them. And coming from a man who once allegedly locked a rival's clothes in a freezing locker overnight just to see if they'd catch hypothermia, that's saying something. You've got to understand, Fuji was old school. He came from the Lou Thez era of respect and unspoken codes. If you broke those codes, Fuji didn't just hold a grudge, he slow-cooked it like a crockpot vendetta. He had the patience of a spider and the memory of an elephant with a grudge. Some say he kept a little notebook with names and incidents. Others think he just remembered the way your handshake felt and how you looked at him when he offered advice. Either way, you didn't want to end up in Fuji's mental no-fly zone. If you did, you were in for weeks, maybe months, of passive-aggressive chaos. Fuji's blend of old-school honor and devious cruelty made him one of the most respected and feared figures in wrestling. He'd throw a fireball one night and help a rookie fix his boots the next. But cross him? The fireball might end up in your gym bag. If Mr. Fuji was a methodical samurai who measured every strike, the Iron Chic was a Molotov cocktail in boots, lit on both ends and hurled into the nearest locker room. To say these two were opposites would be like comparing a sniper rifle to a hand grenade. But the real issue wasn't their differences. It was Chic's ability to make Fuji break his own rules. And if you knew Fuji, you'd know that breaking protocol was like a nun moonlighting as a blackjack dealer. It was sacrilegious. The Iron Chic wasn't just loud. He was a symphony of chaos, performed entirely on cocaine and unfiltered rage. While Chic's in-ring persona was bombastic, his backstage antics were even louder, and not in the charming eccentric uncle kind of way. More like the drunk relative at a funeral who wants to do karaoke. Fuji respected professionalism, and to him, Chic was the poster boy for unprofessionalism. While other wrestlers stretched or strategized, Chic was allegedly doing lines in the locker room and offering to humble people in the most anatomically impossible ways. Fuji viewed this kind of behavior the way most people view food poisoning: uncomfortable, embarrassing, and impossible to forget. Sources like Bret Hart's autobiography and multiple interviews with wrestling veterans note that Chic would often show up late, impaired, or both. That didn't sit well with Fuji, who believed the wrestling business was sacred, like a kabuki theater with more body slams. When Chic's actions risked the flow of a show or the safety of others, Fuji didn't see a troubled man. He saw liability in curly-toed boots. It's said that Fuji once refused to share a dressing room with Chic after the latter brought what Fuji dubbed a chemical circus to a taping. The two had a heated confrontation, off-camera and off-script. Fuji didn't yell, he didn't threaten, he just stared. Long, cold, the kind of stare that makes you want to call your mother and apologize. While many tolerated Chic's antics because of his drawing power, Fuji saw it as the kind of rot that destroys locker room culture. And Fuji didn't do rot. He once allegedly walked out of a meeting when Chic was introduced as a possible co-manager for a heel stable, muttering something in Japanese that loosely translated to, "Only a fool gives a monkey the keys to the temple." The Iron Chic would later praise Fuji in interviews, calling him a real Japanese tough guy. But that praise never made its way back. Fuji, like a jaded ex, never returned the sentiment. Behind closed doors, he reportedly called Chic the clown prince of disrespect, and kept a running tally of his offenses like a referee with OCD. One anonymous road agent once said, "If Chic was the chaos, Fuji was the karma." At one event, Fuji reportedly sprinkled cayenne pepper inside Chic's knee brace. When Chic complained of the burning pain, Fuji merely shrugged and offered him a glass of milk. In the end, Chic represented everything Fuji loathed: unpredictability, recklessness, and an unwillingness to respect the craft. To Fuji, the ring was a temple, and Chic was the guy pissing in the holy water. And for that, the grudge didn't just simmer, it was sautéed, flambéed, and plated with a garnish of pure loathing. To the average fan, Davey Boy Smith was a beloved powerhouse with a sweet accent and ridiculous braids. But to Mr. Fuji, He was a walking chemistry experiment with a passport and no volume control. Fuji's disdain for the British Bulldog wasn't about nationality or style, it was about backstage behavior, ego, and what Fuji reportedly called roid rage with a Yorkshire accent. While Davy Boy could put on solid matches, especially when motivated, or not heavily bloated, Fuji believed the man had one fatal flaw. He thought he was untouchable. The Bulldog often showed up late, allegedly popped painkillers like popcorn, and once threw up mid-match and tried to blame catering. Fuji, who valued professionalism even while actively sabotaging people for fun, saw Bulldog's antics as both embarrassing and dangerous. Stories from guys like Bret Hart and Jim Cornette hint at tension between Fuji and Bulldog during the early 90s. Bulldog's erratic behavior, fueled by injuries, a wild travel schedule, and an overflowing medicine cabinet, made him the kind of guy Fuji didn't trust to handle a promo, let alone a tag match. Once, according to a former WWF road agent, Fuji whispered to Yokozuna, "Don't trust him to catch you. He might forget what country he's in." It wasn't personal. It was professional disdain. Fuji couldn't stand recklessness, and Bulldog, in his later years especially, was a swirling cocktail of it. Injuries, poor choices, and backstage diva behavior made him a ticking time bomb. Fuji preferred his chaos calculated, not accidental. To Fuji, Davy Boy Smith was like a giant, unpredictable dog, often lovable, but prone to ruining the carpet and barking at nothing. And if you can't trust the Bulldog not to bite the mailman, you can be sure Fuji kept a can of metaphorical mace on standby. David Schultz, Dr. D to fans, the human lawsuit to reporters, was a man built entirely out of rage and conspiracy theories. If you imagine what happens when you teach a pit bull to use nunchucks and swear like a sailor, you're roughly halfway to understanding Schultz. And that kind of unfiltered aggression was precisely what Mr. Fuji hated. Fuji admired stoic cruelty, cold, calculated, almost poetic vengeance. Schultz was none of that. He was a barfight with a mullet. His most infamous moment came when he slapped journalist John Stossel into Next Week for daring to question the authenticity of wrestling. And while that made Schultz a cult hero for the anti-media crowd, it made Fuji wince like someone had just spilled soy sauce on a silk kimono. The problem was that Schultz didn't know how to switch off. There was no performer mode, just constant intensity. Even backstage, he'd pace like a paranoid linebacker and bark at catering ladies about their attitudes. According to multiple accounts from road agents and talent like Tony Atlas, Fuji grew increasingly disgusted with Schultz's behavior. It wasn't just unprofessional, it was dangerous. Fuji believed in protecting the business, but not with lawsuits and headlocks in hallways. When Schultz's temper began to affect booking decisions and locker room morale, Fuji allegedly told Vince, "Fire him before he slaps a priest." To Fuji, Schultz was the wrestling equivalent of handing a toddler a shotgun. Loud, unpredictable, and a lawsuit waiting to happen. And in Fuji's black book of enemies, that put him right up there with Iron Chic, minus the Persian boots. Billy Jack Haynes looked like a Greek statue sculpted by someone angry at modern medicine. He had the body of a demigod and the mind of a late-night YouTube commenter. Fuji, ever the traditionalist, respected a man who showed up, did his job, and didn't think Vince McMahon was part of the Illuminati. Haynes failed on all three fronts, according to shoot interviews by Honky Tonk Man and claims in the book The Squared Circle, Life, Death, and Professional Wrestling. By David Shoemaker, Haynes believed everyone, from the booker to the bellboy, was out to get him. Paranoia doesn't play well in a business built on trust falls and back bumps. Fuji reportedly found Haynes exhausting, referring to him as the loudest whisper in the room. Haynes would go on rants about backstage conspiracies, revenue cuts, and alleged cover-ups involving major events. Fuji, a man who once pretended to be blind for 6 months just to sell an angle, found this level of delusion distracting, even by wrestling standards. Things escalated when Haynes began accusing fellow wrestlers of poisoning his food. Fuji, ever the chef of chaos, took this personally. He considered tampering with someone's lunch an art form, not something to be tossed around lightly. When Haynes claimed someone had urinated in his protein shake, Fuji reportedly replied, "Don't flatter yourself. No one would waste good piss." While others in the locker room rolled their eyes and nodded politely, Fuji simply made a mental note: never team with a man who brings tinfoil to catering. To Mr. Fuji, the Ultimate Warrior was less a wrestler and more a malfunctioning carnival ride with a protein addiction. The shaking ropes, the snorting promos, the sprint to the ring cardio display, it was all too much. Fuji, a man who valued precision, pacing, and respect for the craft, saw Warrior as a walking glow stick of everything wrong with modern wrestling. Fuji didn't just roll his eyes at Warrior's antics, he reportedly seethed. Warrior's refusal to sell moves, his self-centered promos, and his Godzilla-sized ego made him the antithesis of what Fuji considered a professional. According to backstage sources like Bobby Heenan and Rick Rude, both of whom also hated Warrior, Fuji thought Warrior's entire persona was a desecration of the wrestling ring. "He looks like a muscle cramp with face paint," Fuji once joked, probably while lacing someone's boots with itching powder. But the real heat came from Warrior's attitude. He no-showed events, demanded absurd paydays, and once threatened to hold up Vince McMahon for more money right before going out live at an event. Fuji, who built a decades-long career on loyalty and grit, viewed this kind of behavior as high treason. That stunt alone reportedly cemented Warrior on Fuji's personal poison list, a mental ledger of people he'd rather throw into traffic than tag with. Then there was the infamous match at Survivor Series 1990, when Warrior teamed with Legion of Doom and Texas Tornado against Mr. Fuji's team. Fuji, even though he was managing heels, couldn't hide his contempt. He practically looked like he wanted to quit wrestling altogether. If you asked Fuji who the worst main eventer of all time was, he probably wouldn't have answered with words. He'd just squint at the sky, slowly shake his head, and whisper, "Shake the ropes all you want, brother. Still no soul in there." Mr. Fuji's legacy is defined by his ability to blend professionalism with raw, unforgiving grudge-holding. Many of his enemies were never able to fully shake off his quiet fury. Despite his charming manager persona, Fuji held a deep respect for tradition and couldn't abide disrespect. For those who crossed him, his cold, calculating demeanor ensured that their actions wouldn't be forgotten easily. Fuji's impact on wrestling is undeniable, but his list of enemies reminds us that even the most skilled professionals have a breaking point. The shadow of Fuji's grudges continues to loom over wrestling history, a reminder that in the world of sports entertainment, respect is earned and quickly lost. Thanks for watching.